the most important evolution in the field has been the shift in attention from the technology to the human users. So when I first started out in the computer field, the technology completely dominated. I mean, there was only certain things you could do. You could only put letters on the screen. So the kinds of graphics that you used were crude things, formed out of shapes and of letters and things like that. The technology has progressed so far that it's faded more and more into the background. I still find, however, that some designers and many developers put too much of their attention on the limitations of the technology and not as enough on what they should be making the system or the website do. I mean, here's one specific example. It is well known that incremental search, where when you start typing search parameters, the solution set that's delivered is filtered dynamically. So you type one letter and you now have all the B's, and you type another letter and it's so forth. For the longest time, people simply said, well, you can't do this on the web, it's impossible. Well, it's not impossible, and it hasn't been impossible for a very long time. And Google now has iGoogle, where you can dynamically filter out a subset of many millions of web pages just as you're entering the parameters. And so they took what is needed from the user's standpoint and found a way to do it in the technology, rather than starting from the frame of mind, well, these are the things that you just can't do, and then force the user to fit into that. I think one of the biggest problems is the economy.
The economy. Okay.
It's hard in IT and the web in general for new graduates especially to find work. So I know that's not the kind of answer that you were looking for, but I do think that is one of the biggest problems. One of the other things that I think represents a major challenge for usability professionals at all levels is the agile development movement and agile methods. And basically, I think so far, interaction designers, user experience designers have been trying to accommodate to the agile techniques, the agile methods. And there's been very little attention paid to maybe how the agile methods and the agile community needs to change the way they do things in order to fit with usability and to make more usable products. Just to pick one, in the agile world, there is an expression BDUF, big design up front. And this is a kind of curse word. It's the worst thing that you can say about a project or a product was, big design up front. And yet, we know, particularly in terms of the architectural aspects of user interfaces and user interaction, if you don't spend the time up front, then you end up with a product that works all right in the details, but in terms of its overall structure is perhaps fundamentally flawed. So there's a real problem with the needs of interaction design, user experience design, to have time to figure out what the problem is, to understand the problem space and the design space, which takes time, and the needs of the agile methods, which are, we start tomorrow and we're going to be cutting code.
Okay.
I think the objections that some people have to do it is that it's dehumanizing. Instead of dealing with a person as a person, you're dealing with them in the context of of their relationship with a particular artifact, using it in a particular context, in the context of a specific activity. I think there is some truth in that, and I think that actually is one of the things designers need to do. They need to pay more attention to uses, to what people are doing with the artifacts that they're designing, and worry less about the complexities of the human person who is in fact trying to make use of their artifact. There is an important philosophical difference here between the people who think that what they're doing is user-centered or human-centered, and the people who think of what they're doing is as activity-centered or performance-centered. Don Norman, in a very important and controversial essay a few years back, expressed this in his title. He said, the article was called "Human-Centered Design Considered Harmful." And it isn't that people aren't important or they aren't interesting as people, as human beings. But if we try to focus on everything, on the whole of richness of human experience, then in a sense we end up focusing on nothing. And ultimately, in the interaction with artifacts, designed artifacts, what is most important is what is the person doing with them? What are they going to be doing with them? What do they need to do? What do they intend to do? And that should be foreground. And all this other stuff is background. But if we focus first on human beings, then we miss this attention to the activity. And I made a similar point in a paper, shortly before Don Norman made his famous comments. And one of the things that comes out of this is the recognition that we don't have adequate tools for understanding human activity. There is something called activity theory, which is a framework for thinking about activities. But until we started working on developing human activity modeling, there weren't tools to really capture and organize this kind of understanding. Well, there are things that you need to understand about your users. But, I mean, and it depends. If you're selling consumer products on the web, you have to understand demographics and buying behavior and personality and things like that in order to sell products. But in each case, the really important thing is to know about the behavior, the expected behavior, the intentions of your users in the context of a particular activity. In the continental case, for example, we did not have the luxury of being able to do ethnographic field research. What we had to do was draw on the knowledge that the team, all experts in the automotive industry, and all of us who've driven and have used these kinds of interfaces in order to build this task model. Well, if we limit it to the web, I think that focusing too much on the technology is a problem, particularly because the web imposes some performance penalties that resident software doesn't face. But actually, one of the most common problems across many different companies and many different ways of organizing the design and development process that I see is when there are conflicts between design-driven solutions and implementation-driven solutions, the programmers and the programming ends up deciding the outcome. And it's very similar to something within the development side of things. When there are conflicts between testing and quality assurance and programming, the decision is made, well, we're going to ship it anyway, even if it doesn't pass all the tests that we want it to. So the result is short-term solutions that ultimately cost more in the long term. They're less usable, they're less reliable, and in some cases, company reputations are destroyed. And so the ultimate cost of doing it, the quick and dirty way, is the whole company. Well, I absolutely believe there are quick solutions, and in fact, a lot of them are counterintuitive, like what we did on the Continental project, which I mentioned in my presentation briefly. We didn't have nearly enough time, and yet we had to come up with a good, usable solution. So what we did is we spent most of our time understanding the problem and creating a very rich, detailed model of what the user's intentions and needs were. And then we started organizing the architecture of the interface and designing screens. This is exactly the opposite of what most teams would do when under extreme pressure. They'd immediately start sketching. And 5 minutes after they'd started sketching, they'd start programming. So ironically, spending more time thinking carefully about the organization, the architecture of the user interface based on a rich task model ultimately saves you time, because the design is dictated then. You see, okay, this is what the user needs to see and what they need to be able to do at this moment in time. That means the screen has to be like this. And it's right. I think it's focus more on the activities within which a designed product is being used, and less on the complications and complexities of the human users. And as a result, you won't solve all the problems, you won't solve all the problems optimally, but you'll do a very good job.